Malthusian Time: Why Escapism Fails. One of the most natural responses to Malthusian time is escapism. Indeed, escapism may be understood as the default coping mechanism of a civilization experiencing temporal overload. Faced with ambient guilt, collapsing attention spans, infinite comparison, perpetual optimization, information saturation, and spiritual exhaustion, the individual instinctively seeks relief. He wants distance from pressure. He wants a break from demands. He wants silence from the constant voice reminding him that he should be doing more, becoming more, earning more, learning more, improving more. This desire is entirely understandable. The mistake lies in assuming that escapism provides what it promises, because while escapism often feels like relief in the moment, it frequently intensifies the very conditions from which one seeks escape. This is one of the central paradoxes of Malthusian time. The exhausted individual turns toward distraction expecting restoration. Instead, he often emerges more fragmented, more anxious, more dissatisfied, and more depleted than before. The reason becomes clearer once we distinguish between rest and escape, because they're not the same thing. Modern culture increasingly treats them as interchangeable, yet they operate according to entirely different psychological principles. Rest restores coherence. Escape suspends awareness. Rest strengthens the individual. Escape temporarily anesthetizes him. Rest replenishes attention. Escape consumes attention. The distinction matters enormously because many of the activities commonly marketed as relaxation are, in reality, forms of controlled dissociation. They do not resolve fragmentation, they merely interrupt awareness of fragmentation temporarily. The individual therefore experiences a peculiar cycle. He feels overwhelmed. He seeks escape. He feels temporary relief. He returns to reality. The underlying condition remains unchanged. Often it has worsened. The cycle repeats. This pattern appears everywhere. Consider doom scrolling. No activity better illustrates the logic of failed escapism. The individual often begins scrolling because he feels tired, stressed, uncertain, lonely, bored, anxious, or mentally overextended. He does not seek information so much as temporary displacement from his own consciousness, yet the structure of doom scrolling guarantees that displacement never becomes restoration. The mind receives novelty continuously, but integration never occurs. Attention jumps from topic to topic without hierarchy, significance, or resolution. Political outrage appears beside celebrity gossip. War appears beside comedy. Economic collapse appears beside sports highlights. Tragedy appears beside advertising. The nervous system remains active. The attention system remains engaged. Consciousness remains fragmented. Nothing actually rests. The individual simply mistakes stimulation for recovery. This is one reason many people emerge from extended scrolling sessions feeling strangely depleted. They consumed enormous quantities of information, yet retain remarkably little of it. Hours disappear without corresponding gains in knowledge, wisdom, skill, or satisfaction. Time has been spent, life has been expended, yet almost nothing meaningful remains. Malthusian time becomes visible precisely here. The individual sought escape from temporal pressure, but instead accelerated temporal dissipation. The same logic applies to binge entertainment. There is nothing inherently wrong with films, television, games, or recreational media. Human beings require leisure. Stories possess enormous value. Art possesses enormous value. Entertainment possesses enormous value. The issue concerns excess. The issue concerns function. Entertainment ceases functioning properly when it becomes primarily a mechanism for avoiding conscious existence itself. At that point, the individual no longer watches because he enjoys the story. He watches because he fears the silence. He fears stillness. He fears the return of unmediated awareness. The screen becomes a buffer, separating him from difficult questions. What am I doing with my life? What deserves my attention? What am I becoming? What am I avoiding? Where is all this leading to? Escapism delays confrontation. It does not eliminate it. The questions remain waiting patiently beneath the noise. Indeed, one of the reasons modern entertainment consumption has reached such extraordinary levels is that Malthusian time creates increasing demand for psychological anesthetic. The more fragmented consciousness becomes, the more attractive temporary escape appears. Entire industries now thrive by supplying distraction at industrial scale. Yet, distraction functions similarly to painkillers. Used appropriately, it has value. Used excessively, it obscures underlying pathology while allowing deterioration to continue. The same pattern appears within substance abuse. Alcohol, narcotics, stimulants, and countless other chemical escapes operate according to similar principles. The individual seeks temporary liberation from psychological pressure. For a brief period, he succeeds. The burden appears lighter. Anxiety weakens, awareness softens. Then the effect fades. Reality returns, often accompanied by additional consequences. The original burden remains unresolved. Sometimes it grows heavier. One of the reasons addiction proves so destructive is that it promises escape from suffering while frequently increasing suffering structurally over time. The individual gradually sacrifices future freedom in exchange for present relief. Malthusian time amplifies this danger because temporal scarcity itself encourages short-term thinking. The exhausted person becomes increasingly willing to borrow against tomorrow if today feels unbearable, yet borrowed time eventually demands repayment. The same principle extends beyond substances into countless forms of passive consumption. Endless videos, endless feeds, endless commentary, endless podcasts consumed not for learning but for occupation. Endless digital wandering through information without direction. Modern individuals increasingly consume content the way previous generations consume food, not because they're hungry, because it is available. And just as abundance of food may produce obesity, abundance of information may produce cognitive saturation without intellectual nourishment. The result is a peculiar state of being simultaneously full and empty. The individual has consumed constantly, yet remains unsatisfied. This dissatisfaction is often interpreted incorrectly. Many assume the problem is insufficient stimulation. Thus they seek more content, more novelty, more entertainment, more distraction, more escape. Yet the dissatisfaction frequently originates from the opposite source. The individual lacks integration. He lacks coherence. He lacks hierarchy. He lacks meaning. No quantity of stimulation can solve problems created by absence of meaning. In fact, stimulation often worsens them because meaning generally emerges through duration, through commitment, through sustained attention, through repeated contact with important things over long periods of time. Malthusian time erodes precisely these capacities. The modern individual therefore attempts to solve fragmentation through activities that increase fragmentation further. This is why escapism fails. Not because pleasure is evil, not because entertainment is evil, not because leisure is evil. Escapism fails because it misunderstands the nature of the wound. The exhausted soul often behaves as though it suffers from insufficient stimulation, when it actually suffers from insufficient orientation. These are entirely different problems. One requires more input, the other requires more direction, and direction cannot be consumed. It must be chosen. This is why many people discover that activities involving genuine engagement restore them more effectively than passive escape. Meaningful conversation, prayer, reading, walking, creating, building, writing, learning, music, craftsmanship, exercise, service, family, friendship. These activities often require effort, yet they restore. This appears paradoxical only until one realizes that restoration does not come from absence of effort. It comes from coherence. The human being is not a machine designed merely to minimize exertion. He is a meaning-seeking creature, requiring alignment between attention and value. Exhaustion often emerges not because effort exists, but because effort lacks integration into a larger framework of significance. Escapism, therefore, becomes a tragic misunderstanding. The individual seeks relief from fragmentation by consuming experiences that deepen fragmentation. He seeks freedom from temporal pressure through activities that dissipate additional time. He seeks recovery from attention scarcity through behaviors that further divide attention. The result is predictable. The escape never truly satisfies. The relief never truly lasts. The fragmentation remains, and Malthusian time continued its quiet work in the background. Because no amount of distraction can answer the question that ultimately matters. What deserves the expenditure of a finite life?